Buckle up, nerds! We're firing up the Flying Winnebago and punching it straight to ludicrous speed. Because we're diving headfirst into the ridiculous, chaotic, jam-covered galaxy of SpaceBalls. This isn't just a Star Wars parody. It's a miracle of improvised brilliance, legal loopholes, and low-budget wizardry that somehow made it to theaters in one piece. Here are 20 outrageous behind-the-scenes facts about SpaceBalls that'll melt your Schwartz. And stick around, because wait till you hear what George Lucas really thought. Lucas said, yes, but with a catch. Before the first scene was even shot, Mel Brooks had to clear one big hurdle. He needed George Lucas's blessing to parody Star Wars in SpaceBalls. Surprisingly, Lucas agreed, but gave one strict condition: no merchandise. That's why SpaceBalls filled its own scenes with fake products like SpaceBalls, the flamethrower. Brooks leaned into the gag, turning the merch ban into a running joke. And in a twist of cosmic irony, those fake products became cult icons, outlasting some real Star Wars toys. Sometimes, limits don't hold you back, they set you free. When the budget vanished, the laughs took off. Plans for SpaceBalls started big, with grand space battles and shiny special effects. Then halfway through, the budget got slashed. Hard. Instead of panicking, Mel Brooks got weirder. He doubled down on the absurd. The ships became obvious toys, the props homemade, the tone even more chaotic. Brooks turned financial limits into comedy fuel. What should have sunk the movie ended up giving it that charming, off-the-rails energy fans still love. The cheapest spaceship ever put on screen. Every sci-fi has a signature ship, and SpaceBalls went with a flying Winnebago. It sounds like a joke, but that van was real. The production team took an actual working RV, bolted on giant wings, and filmed it cruising down real highways before layering in the space effects. Mel Brooks later joked, it was the cheapest spaceship in cinema history. Inside scenes were shot on a sound stage, but what you see outside is the real deal. And that scrappy DIY spirit, it fit the movie perfectly. Because nothing says rebellion like launching a budget RV into space. The Raspberry Herd round the galaxy. Sometimes the funniest moments come from total chaos. In SpaceBalls, there's a scene where Dark Helmet discovers the radar's been jammed. That wasn't in the script. The actors improvised the whole thing, including flinging real raspberry jam into the console. Mel Brooks rolled with it, letting Rick Moranis deliver the now iconic line, "There's only one man who would dare give me the raspberry, Lone Star." The crew had to stop filming right after because the jam clogged the ventilation system. But the mess they made became comedy gold. Turns out, the galaxy's greatest weapon wasn't lasers, it was fruit spread. The joke that brushed off the execs. When subtlety fails, go full absurd. In SpaceBalls, there's a scene where troopers comb the desert, literally. Brooks added it as a response to studio execs begging for more visual gags. So, he gave them two guys dragging giant black plastic combs across the sand. One comb even snapped mid-take and had to be taped back together. Brooks didn't care, he kept it in. Because sometimes the best way to handle Hollywood notes is to drag a punchline across the desert until it sticks. The Smuggler Farm Boy mashup. Why choose between a scoundrel and a hero when you can be both? In SpaceBalls, Lone Star isn't just a parody, he's a hybrid. Mel Brooks fused Han Solo and Luke Skywalker into one character, giving him a vest, a princess to rescue, and a budget Falcon to fly. Bill Pullman studied both roles to mix Solo's swagger with Luke's earnest charm. The result? A space rogue with heart and hair like a shampoo commercial. Lone Star wasn't just a spoof. He was the Star Wars multiverse before it was cool. The anthem of absurdity. Sometimes the best soundtracks come last. For SpaceBalls, the theme song didn't exist until after filming wrapped. Mel Brooks wanted a track that was loud, goofy, and totally self-aware. So composer John Morris whipped one up in just a few days, complete with a fake band and lyrics rewritten on the fly to squeeze in last-minute jokes. It was chaotic, catchy, and completely on-brand. Like the movie itself, the song wasn't polished, it was perfect in its own ridiculous way. When George gave the nod, even parodies need a blessing from the original master. During post-production on SpaceBalls, Mel Brooks nervously screened a rough cut for George Lucas. The verdict? Lucas laughed and called it a loving spoof. He even joked that he wished he had come up with yogurt. Lucasfilm didn't just approve, they pitched in, offering tips on how to polish the space sequences. For Brooks, that seal of approval wasn't just comforting, it was rocket fuel, because if George was on board, nothing was off-limits. The sequel that never was. Sometimes the best joke is the one you never finish. In SpaceBalls, Mel Brooks teased a follow-up called SpaceBalls 2, The Search for More Money. Fans loved it, studios asked for it, and it quickly became Hollywood legend. Brooks said he'd only do it if Rick Moranis returned, but Moranis left acting to raise his kids. Over the years, sequel scripts came and went. Pitches were floated, but nothing ever took off. At fan conventions, Brooks still gets asked about it, and his reply is always the same: only if we can go even more ludicrous. He once joked the sequel already exists, just in a parallel universe where he's president and everyone wears Mega Maid helmets. From flop to force. Not every classic starts with a bang. When SpaceBalls hit theaters, critics scratched their heads and ticket sales barely buzzed. Audiences didn't quite know what to make of it. A Star Wars spoof with yogurt and jam. But over the years, the quotes spread, the VHS wore thin, and midnight screenings brought it roaring back. Film schools now teach it as a parody blueprint. Brooks didn't chase trends, he made fun of them, and in doing so, created one of his own. Sometimes the slowest launch makes for the longest orbit. Helmet's off-the-cuff genius doesn't always follow a script. In SpaceBalls, Rick Moranis didn't just play Dark Helmet, he invented him on the spot. That whiny, over-the-top villain? Totally improvised. Moranis said the role felt like unleashing every tantrum he never threw as a kid, and Mel Brooks let him go wild. One crew member even admitted the camera shook sometimes because the operators were laughing too hard. Dark Helmet wasn't just a character, he was chaos in cosplay, and that chaos became comedy gold, melting for the role. Sometimes comedy stinks, literally. In SpaceBalls, Pizza the Hut wasn't CGI or a puppet. He was a man in a full-body nightmare of rubber, real cheese, and slime. Actor Richard Carle could only stay inside the suit for a few minutes before nearly passing out. One crew member said it smelled like a microwave full of regret. Every take ended in a cleanup disaster that took hours. But Pizza the Hut became one of the film's grossest, weirdest icons. Proof that sometimes, the messier the monster, the bigger the laugh. Too hot to hound comedy can be sweaty work. On SpaceBalls, John Candy played Barf in a full-body fursuit with remote-controlled ears and a tail. The costume got so hot, he nearly passed out. Crew had to hose him down between takes, but Candy never complained. He loved the role, even ad-libbed some of Barf's best lines like, "I'm my own best friend." It wasn't just a costume, it was a commitment. And that mix of heart, humor, and heat made Barf a fan favorite forever. Double act in disguise. Sometimes two people make one unforgettable character. In SpaceBalls, Dot Matrix had the voice of Joan Rivers and the body of a professional mime, Lorene Yarnell. Yarnell brought the golden robot to life on set, while Rivers added her signature sass in post-production. The two actresses never met, but their combined talents created a C-3PO parody with punch. Dot wasn't just a sidekick, she was sharp, stylish, and stole scenes in heels, a perfect fusion of movement and mouth. Too rude for liftoff? Comedy always walks a fine line, but satire rockets past it. SpaceBalls pushed the envelope with jokes that teetered on the edge of what censors would allow. One infamous line, "I bet she gives great helmet," nearly got cut. Mel Brooks fought hard to keep it, arguing the absurdity softened the sting. In the end, the ratings board let most of the innuendos slide. It was a win for parody and proof that bold comedy could still fly. Double trouble in gold. Sometimes, if you want something done right, you do it twice. In SpaceBalls, Mel Brooks didn't just direct. He doubled up as Yogurt and President Scroob, but playing Yogurt came at a cost. The gold makeup irritated his skin, and the costume was stiff and claustrophobic. Brooks could only shoot in short bursts before needing a break. Still, he refused to hand it off. He believed only he could deliver the punchlines with the timing he envisioned, and that commitment gave the film some of its funniest moments. Now. What even is time when you're watching SpaceBalls inside SpaceBalls? In one of the film's wildest scenes, Dark Helmet and crew literally watch themselves, watching themselves live. The studio panicked, thinking audiences would get lost in the meta-spiral. But Mel Brooks insisted it stay, and that surreal fourth-wall-breaking moment became comedy gold. Now, it's not just a fan favorite. It's taught in film schools as a masterclass in meta-storytelling. Because sometimes, the weirdest joke is also the smartest. Yogurt trauma. Some scenes leave emotional scars, others just smell really bad. In SpaceBalls, Daphne Zuniga had to fall face first into a puddle of actual yogurt. It was cold, lumpy, and got slimier with every retake. By the third try, it was seeping into her costume and hair like a dairy-based horror movie. She pushed through like a pro, even though the set reeked of expired groceries by the end. Zuniga later joked it was the only time she had to shower between takes. And yes, she swore off yogurt for years. Stunt doubles, real laughs. Sometimes the best punchline is hiding in plain sight. In SpaceBalls, Lone Star and Princess Vespa are caught by guards, only for it to be revealed, yep, those are their stunt doubles. Real doubles, real wigs, real mustaches, real confused expressions. One of the actual stunt performers said they were a little offended that their face got a bigger laugh than their flips. The scene hit so hard during test screenings that the audience drowned out the next few lines. Brooks didn't mind. He said the gag was inspired by a real convo with his stunt coordinator who joked, "No one notices us until it's funny." So Brooks made sure they got noticed. The most beloved spoof. Some movies fade, but SpaceBalls keeps jamming the radar. Mel Brooks says it's the single most requested film of his career. From fans who named their pets Barf, to grooms who wore Dark Helmet at their weddings, the love is real. Asked about a sequel, Brooks always laughs, "Only if I can go to plaid." And get this, the Schwartz rings were legit. Each lead actor got to keep one. Rick Moranis still has his, and sometimes even wears it to fan events. To fans, it's not just a ring, it's a galactic inside joke, a trophy of absurdity, and a reminder, may the Schwartz be with you.